In this lecture, we'll be talking about functions of Python. A function is a block of code which only runs when it is called. Okay. You can pass data known as parameters into a function. A function can return data as a result. Now, the first thing that we're going to learn is how can we create a function on this Python platform. In Python, a function is defined using the def, that is def keyword. For example, if suppose you want to create a function with name apple, fine, so you can do it like this, place a colon, and after that, suppose you want to print this thing, hello world. This is what you want to get printed on the output screen. Okay, so this is how you can create a function. Now the second thing is, how are you going to call this function? So for calling this function, what we have to do, we need to use the name followed by the parenthesis. We need to make use of the name of the function followed by these two parentheses. So what you have to do, you can copy this thing from here and you can put it over here. Now this is how you can call a function, and this is going to give you the required result like this. Fine. Now the second thing is arguments. Arguments are specified after the function name inside the parenthesis. You can add as many arguments as you want, just separate them with a comma. Okay, remember this thing. Now let's take an example and understand the concept of argument. So for that, we are going to create a function again. Let's say I'm going to create a function with my name. Fine. So I'm going to create so here I've created a function. So here I'm going to create a function with my own name, and this is what I am passing as a parameter, or you can say an argument inside this function. Now if suppose I want to print my name like this, so this f name that I have made use of here, it is working as a parameter. Okay. Now after this, what you can do, we can call this function like this. Okay. And here, instead of this f name, we are going to put something else. Let's say email. Now let's see what is going to happen. What are we going to get in the output? So this is what we are going to get as an output. Now why we are getting this? See, when we have called this function, okay, so this is the value that we are passing while calling this function. Okay, now this value is going to go in this parameter that we have used here, or you can say in this argument that we have defined over here inside this function. Fine. Now the value of f name, you can say that it's a kind of variable in which this value is going to get stored. Fine. Now this value email is going to come here, and what is the complete thing which is going to get printed? It is email ref. Why? Because we have made use of an concatenation operator in between these two things over here. I hope you have understood this thing. Now let's talk about arbitrary arguments. Okay, how can we pass arbitrary arguments? If you do not know how many arguments that will be passed into your function, add a asterisk before the parameter name in the function definition. This way the function will receive a tuple of arguments and can access the items accordingly. Let me show it to you practically. How can you pass arbitrary arguments to a function? Now if the number of arguments is unknown, add a asterisk before the parameter name. How you can do it, that's what we are going to see now. Let's say the function name is this, my function. Okay, and if you want to pass an arbitrary arguments, what you can do, you can place an asterisk sign like this, and then let's say this is a parameter which I'm passing, kids. Okay, now here I want this thing to get printed. The youngest child is, suppose, let's say this thing I want to see in the output. Okay, now let's call this function. How can we call this function? By using this name that we have given to this function, right? And after that we can place these two parentheses, and inside this we need to pass some values for this variable that we have defined over here, right? So let's say email is the first thing, then Gaurav, then Vikrant. So this way you can pass arbitrary arguments to a function. Linux. Fine. Now let's press enter and see what is going to happen. So what are we getting in the output? The youngest child is Vikrant. Why are we getting this output? Because this is a tuple over here that we have passed as a parameter for this function. Now the index of this one is 0, this one is 2, and the index of this one is 2. The index of this one is 0, of this one is 1, and of this one it is 2. So it is going to, this whole thing is going to go here inside this kids variable, and when it will come here, when the compiler will come here, it is going to print this kids2, the value, the item which is there on index number 2 in this tuple. So it is Vikrant which is there on index 2. So that is the reason along with this thing it is going to print Vikrant, right? So that's how you can pass an arbitrary arguments to a particular function. Now if suppose if you do not know how many keyword arguments that will be passed into your function, add 2 asterisks before the parameter name in the function definition. Let me show it to you how. So I'm going to make use of the same code which I have written over here. Let's copy it and paste it over here, and instead of this 1 asterisk I'm going to place 2 asterisk signs now. Okay, now let's press enter, and here I am going to write down, let's copy this thing only. Okay, and let's put it here. Now in place of this kids2 I would like to have this thing, L name. Okay, L name is for the last name. Now how are we going to pass the value for this argument that we have defined over here? For that, let's copy this name of the function along with these 2 parentheses. Okay, and inside this, how are you going to pass a value? So for that we need to make use of, we can make use of 2 different variables. F name is equals to, let's say, Gaurav, and L name is equals to, let's say, Jen. Now what will happen when you will press enter key? This is what you are going to get as an output. Now why you're getting this as an output? Because what is happening here. See, if the number, see, remember this thing first. If the number of keyword arguments is unknown, then you have to make use of this these 2 double asterisks over here. Now here we are passing 2 two different values using two different variables. One with this f name and second with this l name. So this whole thing is going to get accessed by this variable over here. Okay, and finally kids l name. This is what? This is a keyword with which this value which we have stored in this variable is going to get accessed. Okay, so this is how this function can access the variables that we have defined over here, the values that we have defined over here using these variables. Okay, now what is the difference between this code that we made use of here and the one that we made use of here? Here we pass the values directly for this function, but here what we are doing, we have stored the values in the variables first, and then we access those values using the variables instead of using the index. So this is a major difference between these two codes that we have made use of here. Now, if suppose you want to pass a list as an argument, how can you do that? See, you can send any data types of arguments to a function, whether it is a string, number, list, dictionary. Okay, and it will be treated as the same data type inside the function. If you send a list as an argument, it will still be a list when it reaches the function, right? So let's use the same concept, and for passing a list as a value for this function, let's use some other variable over here. Let's say food. Okay, now if suppose we have a for loop for this food variable, okay, and you want to print the value of x like this. Now how are you going to pass a list for this function over here? So for doing that, what you can do, you can define a list first. Let's say fruits. And how can you make a list? By defining the items inside that rectangle brackets, apple, banana, then mango. So it's a list that I have created over here, right? Let's press enter. Now if you want to pass this as an argument, or you can say as a value for this function, what you can do, you can just copy this function from here, and till this point we need to copy, right? And instead of this food, this is how you can pass a list as a parameter. So this is how you're going to get as this is what you're going to get as an output. Fine. Now let's see how can we return values. To let a function return a value, use a return statement. Remember this thing. For example, let's have a function with name mathematics. Okay, and inside this, let's pass a parameter. Okay, using this variable x, we can do this. And let's return 5 into x. So what will happen if you will pass a command like this, print mathematics, and here let's pass 5. Now let's see what is going to happen. So we'll get 25. Why are we getting 25? Because here we are calling this function mathematics, right? And what is the value that we are passing for this variable x over here? See, whatever value you're going to define here, it is going to get stored in this variable x first. Okay, and after that the compiler is going to come here, and it is going to calculate the product of 5 and the value which is there in this variable x. So it will be 25. And when this after this, with the help of this return keyword, the compiler is going to return the product. Whatever the result is, the compiler is going to return that, and finally this print value, it is going to print that result. Okay, so that's the reason, that's how this code is going to get executed. Okay, now let's talk about recursion. See, Python also accepts function recursion, which means a defined function can call itself. Okay, recursion is a common mathematical and programming concept. It means that a function calls itself. This has a benefit of meaning that you can loop through data to reach a result. Fine. Now let's understand it with the help of an example. Let's define a function first. I'm defining a function with name try recursion. Okay, and inside this I am passing this variable k as a parameter. Now here let's make use of if loop. If the value of k is greater than 0, now what I would, let's make use of this code again. I haven't placed that round bracket, so that is the reason I was getting the syntax error. I got the syntax error. So if k is greater than 0, let's say the value of result, this is another variable that I am making use of. So as you know that we don't need to declare any variable in on this Python platform, so we can use the variables directly. We just have to put the name and directly we can use the variables. So k plus let's make use of this function try recursion. So we are making use of the same function within this function. Okay, inside this function we are making use of this function again. This is recursion. Let's say k minus 1. Okay, and finally once the result gets calculated, I would like to print the final result. So this will happen if k is greater than 0. Okay, and else, I think there is some syntax error. Let's copy this and put it over here. Yeah, now it is fine. So else what should happen? Else the result should be equal to 0. I would like this function to return the final result. Okay, and where do I need to keep this line? Here. Fine. So make sure the indentation that you're defining is correct. Now let's pass a value for try recursion function. So for that we can copy this function from here and put it over here. If suppose we pass 6, what is the output we are going to get? We will get this output. Now why we are getting this output? See, this is going to call this function, and with this the value that will be assigned to k is 6. Now this condition is true for this value, so it is going to come here. Result is equal to k plus try recursion k minus 1. Now what will happen here? See, the value of k is equals to 6 at present. Try recursion k minus 1. The value of k at present is 6 minus 1 is 5. So again this method is going to get called up for the value 5. Okay, and now this is again true for the value 5. Now it is going to come again here. So that's how the loop will continue, and this is what you will get is an output. So this is how you can make use of a function inside the same function. So this is it for this lecture. Hope you enjoyed this lecture a lot. Please do like and subscribe to my channel, and also share the link of this video with your colleagues so that they can also enjoy these free online coding classes on my channel.